But sort of linking the discussions about how we're thinking about what organising means today, and I think Sally's points were really strong about the importance of looking to history, but maybe it's not that that organising isn't new, but it is different in the context that we live in and the way politics is practiced and thought of. So what I want to do is kind of go backwards a little bit and think about if our idea of what it means to be an active citizen or what it means to be a good citizen is changing in this context as well. So to start off that discussion, I've sort of these two ideas or two norms of active citizenship, and these norms reflect both what people do, current practices, but also the ideas of what it means to be. So they're also quite normative or prescriptive about what people ought to do. So we've got these two pole positions of what it means to be a citizen. The first is the dutiful citizen who has elections, government at the core of their democratic participation. They use traditional media to follow the news, trust leaders, and are members and joiners of formal political organisations. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have what's been called by Lance Bennett, an American academic who I've been doing some work with. He calls them self-actualising citizens. They've got a weaker allegiance to government, focus on lifestyle and issue politics, mistrust media and politicians, join loose networks for social and political action, and use digital media for communication. So they're quite two different ideas of being an active or a good citizen. And earlier today, I heard some people talking about sort of young people and issue politics. My interests are mainly in studying young people and emerging forms of participation. So when people are talking about issue-driven politics, what they're really saying is these are people who are not joining organisations. They're not subscribing to what we would traditionally think of as a role for membership. Okay, and self-actualising citizens is also emphasising what's happening online in terms of participation. And I was interested in the session just before lunch that was on online campaigning that this binary came out. It wasn't said explicitly, but I can't remember the speaker's name, sorry, but the speaker sort of pointed out to what was happening online. It's just a tool. This is what we do online, and the real activism is what happens offline. So the real activism is that more dutiful, traditional forms of participation. So even if we're not using necessarily this language, these ideas about what is better participation or what is more meaningful participation come through quite consistently in the way we understand and see politics. So one of the arguments is, I wonder if that'll work. Oh yeah, okay. See, academic, have to hide behind some numbers. One of the arguments about what's changing for young people is that a lot of both their social experiences and their social interaction through social networking are all obviously happening online, but also increasingly their political engagement is happening online. And this is just a quick snapshot. I happened to run a survey with 300 first-year Australian politics students 2 weeks ago, just to get a sense of the sorts of things that they were involved in and participating in. Generally, they were more participatory than the general population, and that's to be expected because they're at university, they're highly, on the way to becoming highly educated. But I was also interested in what they were doing online. And the main thing here is about the high proportion of this group of 18 and 19-year-olds, university students, who are using social networking services. So the last column, the 60% who are sharing information with others about community and political issues, and the 41% who are taking action on community and political issues solely through using social networking services such as Twitter and Facebook and so on. So for them, this was a normal extension of their everyday lives, was to bring their politics into the way they're using online networks. The other interesting thing here was that women are more likely to do those things than young men as well. And I think there's something interesting as well, maybe we can talk about in discussion about the sort of continuing gendered nature of participation and how we value it as well. But the other way that I've been interested in looking for these norms of dutiful and self-actualising citizenship is that the way they're presented to young people as opportunities to get involved or opportunities to participate. So while my survey with first years was a very limited study, another piece of research I've been involved in was looking at 100 different youth-led and youth-serving websites in Australia. So websites are set up by a range of community and political organisations targeting young people or being run by young people to see how some of these ideas about what it means to be a good citizen, what it means to be active, come out through what these websites do. And what I found was that the majority of the websites subscribe to this idea of dutiful citizenship. If you want to get involved in politics, it's through formal institutions, it's aimed at government, traditional means of participation. But I also saw that there were about 20 of my 100 organisations that were more of that sort of self-actualising, networked, online-driven sort of politics. And then I found a group of sites, the 21 sites that sat in the middle, that are a combination of dutiful and self-actualising. And I'll talk a little bit more about this idea in a moment, because I think this is one of the more important ideas about the sort of merging of both of these notions of being a good citizen. The only other points I want to make about that are the clear differences between a dutiful and a self-actualising site. Self-actualising is much more likely to be online. It's much more likely to have young people writing and developing the site. It's more likely to have young people as leaders within the organisational structure. Interestingly, they're less likely to have government funding, so they're often less likely to have a lot of resources at all. And when they are getting resources, they're predominantly from advertising. So there is a different sort of funding stream that's affecting those as well. All right, I'm going to skip the next one. Okay, but it was that middle block that I was interested in. So if we think about dutiful and self-actualising as sort of polar opposites, I'm kind of interested in a new sort of third stream, which I'm clumsily at the moment calling an empowered/critical citizens. There's been a lot of research on critical citizens to understand how young people and the general population engage with politics. They might be cynical about politicians, but they're still sort of engaged in what's going on. And Pippa Norris talks about critical citizens. But what I'm interested in is that other stream of online organisations I was looking at that combine both these ideas of what it means to be a good citizen. And some of the things that characterise those organisations is that they have more money. Okay, they're better resourced. Often to continue a sort of broader political or community agenda, obviously organisations need resources and need to generate ways of raising money, be it through donations, through government grants, through philanthropy from other large organisations and so on, or increasingly through advertising. Another thing that characterised some of these organisations was more ideas about what participation is for, that it's around, and I heard some people talking about this morning, about not just giving people an opportunity to have a say, but also being responsive and listening, so that there is some sort of dialogue going on between citizens and people in power, decision makers, and giving people capacity to what they say can make a difference, can create change in the way that the Sydney Alliance that Amanda was talking about as well. Another factor about this other norm or idea of citizenship is that it deals genuinely with diversity. A lot of research talks about young people and politics, doesn't talk about the differences among young people. There are often assumptions that young people have the same experiences, whereas if we look at the data, the young people who are active in politics tend to be university educated, they tend to be from particular higher socioeconomic status, and they tend to be generally from sort of white middle class backgrounds. And we don't often talk about diversity among young people and the capacity to attract a broader range of young people to engage in community and politics and represent their experiences in those decision-making processes as well. And there were examples of some sort of organisations that were targeting different groups of young people too. Another idea of thinking about focusing on the internet is this idea of what it means to be an active citizen. Doesn't necessarily mean devoting your life to politics and being a citizen, being an activist 24/7. So other ideas about lowering the thresholds for participation, which is generally what does happen online, in terms of making it easier for people to become involved, making it easier for people to join with like-minded others rather than devoting their life or selling their soul, as some might say it as well, to being an activist. It's not that I don't think that that's important, but if we want to broaden the scope of people who are critically and actively engaged, then we need to think about lowered thresholds for participation. Okay, and the last point is about, which I think was really covered by the other two speakers, is about thinking about campaigning that isn't necessarily bound by organisational forms, but is around a broader campaign with a broader sort of goal, be it an issue or creating a better Sydney for people to live in, and so on. All right, so thinking about these competing ideas of what it means to be a good citizen today and how... Whoop. I go back. That's tricky, isn't it? Sorry. Over-exuberant. Okay, so I think there are a lot of questions that remain that I'd be interested if people want to talk about in discussion. About these... So what does it mean to be an active citizen today when there are these competing ideas within organisations and the way organisations promote involvement and participation? And can parties and large non-government organisations respond to the growth in self-actualising citizens, particularly focusing on this idea of that people might not want to join or sign up or pay membership fees versus the creation of loose networks and so on? And is there a problem in communicating ideas between these different types of citizens? And is there a middle ground about fostering some kind of idea of a new norm of empowered or critical citizenship that both takes these ideas around responsibility to the broader community, but also includes those elements of self-actualisation around dialogue, networks, online community building and so on? And ongoing gender and class differences in participation and in active citizenship in general. How can we engage with those more broadly? And then the last point, which again was raised, I think, in the earlier panel, was this idea that if you engage online, that's not real engagement, and it's simply clicktivism, and it's sort of, or slacktivism if we're getting even more pejorative. It's all too easy and doesn't actually create any change or any influence at all. So is it possible to engage more broadly in that debate within those traditional organisations as well? That's all.